Reaching the Academy from Proxima 3 didn't take long, at least not in a human ship. If they had taken anyone else's, they'd still be in transit for probably another 30 hours. But since humans have a tendency of using jump technology instead of standard FTL like everyone else, it really didn't take long. 2 or 3 jumps, which honestly barely even shake the ship once you put the buffers in place, and poof, there he is in deep orbit. As the ship settled, he immediately put the cloaking shield back on, but he had to get the kids, and of course the wife, to the shuttle to get them back down on the planet. Unfortunately for him, he had to enlist the help of his AI chief to help him carry the kids. The chief just didn't seem to care, really, but then again, he is AI. Yet, as soon as everyone was in place and buckled in, he saw all 3 of them resting, and all he could think was, what a precious sight. I want to remember them just like this. Life is about the little things, and this was one of those moments that if he could, he'd grab onto forever. Then he thought, oh wait, I can, and immediately snapped a 3D picture of it. Once that was done, of course, he had to get to the bridge and take himself down. Thankfully, most of all the calculations were taking care of the AI on board. Yet, as he was on his way down, he actually sent a message to the consulate, the highest rank of those who actually contacted him, and simply stated, I'm on my way to the planet. I'll be in first thing in the morning. He got a response almost immediately that said, no you won't. Now is the best time. He was confused. This doesn't usually happen. Now, he thought to himself. Then he responded, all right, consulate or my office? They responded, we're already near your office. We'll meet you there. This unsettled him a little bit, as he realized that if it was so important that the consulate was actually going to show up, then bad things could be happening. He just didn't know what, and they weren't telling him, which made it even worse. He settled the family into the house, kissed his wife goodbye, she didn't even wake up, and he immediately traveled to the office. When he got there, he met the dean of students, i.e. the chancellor, the consulate head, and someone from Earth Intel. When he was introduced to the I.O., there was, Office of Intelligence, Larry didn't even shake his hand. He said, great, a spook. Now I know we're in trouble. A spook? You guys use that phrase? Yeah, I know it's an old phrase, but we still use it from my days, back when I did what I used to do. Well, it's a good thing I'm not black then, isn't it? Oh, and you say I'm old school? Jeez, you guys are assholes no matter what. With that, the Chancellor stepped in and tried to calm everyone down. The Chancellor, not quite being human, was thanked for his time, but the humans had to deal with human business. The Dean immediately thanked them for the little bit of intel they could share, as he realized things could get very, very, very interesting when it comes to dealing with a new crop of students. As they settled in, Larry offered, obviously, a drink to everyone, and then they were informed of what was going on and why he needed to be briefed as soon as possible. You see, classes were going to begin to start for the next semester here very soon, and he needed to know what was going on because things could get very dicey. Considering where the Academy is, the planet is very close to the galactic center. In fact, so close that if war was ever to kick off, it would be prime real estate. All Larry could think to himself is, didn't we just end one of these pieces of shit? And he brought up this much. Of course, the consulate was not pleased at this. The intel kind of joked and simply stated, you know as well as the rest of us, peace is only a time to reload. With that, Larry groaned at the idea of this. All right, what then? If you guys came all the way down here, you must have something important to say, so do me a favor and just say it. The consulate, and of course the spook himself, was more than a little put back at this, realizing that Larry's demeanor had changed into a very non-professional yet very gruff manner. They both had read his file and realized that this was a time they just needed to break everything down. They started talking about the two former enemies at first, starting with the Caltipsian. The Caltipsian being a very large group of engineers, and large quite literally, as they are very large personnel, some of them just looming over the top of humans. Though imposing, in all reality, the Caltipsian didn't move nearly fast enough to actually be a danger to humans, even an unarmed human, in hand-to-hand combat. However, this did not stop them from being still exceptionally skilled engineers, especially when pushed like anyone else. The Caltipsians were noticed that they were not just rebuilding their forces, but they were building up their forces in very, very large ships covered in census arrays and firearms. We didn't know what was going on, he said, but it seems as though they're getting ready for another push. We just don't know the target yet. The kicker is they were also looking into buying any type of human intel they could. And I mean anything. Anything on society, but especially when it came to anything that humans had for engineering. Along with that, they were trying to buy any human ship they could get their bulbous friggin' mitts on. It didn't matter if the ship was working or not, even if it only had partial engines or partial weapons. Hell, if it was only part of the ship, they were paying top dollar for it. This, in a trade of goods, was something that Larry and all the others had seen before, and they did not enjoy the idea. Larry started looking over all the star maps and started zooming in on each portion to see what they had as far as intel. Though incomplete, a few of the external scans could see that many of the shipyards were getting ready to build massive ships. The shipyards themselves looked brand new. Larry brought this up, and it was agreed. Yeah, they built the shipyards within the past 2 years. We don't know exactly what they're going to make, but whatever it is, it's a hell of a lot bigger and probably a whole lot meaner than whatever they were building before. But what about these other shipyards? That is not that may be a Caltipsian design, but that's not for them. It is of very little interest at this point of the briefing. However, we need to look into this also. Along the side, he could see that the security for these shipyards was absolutely insane. The layers upon layers upon layers of sensors that they had, reaching out well beyond where they needed to be, were clearly there to sensor sweep an area in case a human ship had bumped in. In actuality, a few of the drones had been detected and had simply blinked out, sending themselves either into the closest star or had gotten themselves back within friendly territory. It didn't matter which one. All they knew is that they were now able to be spotted, even though not directly, because if they were fully spotted, they most likely would have been fired upon. All anyone knew is that they sent ships out to try and find them. Along with that, the security inside their intel, as far as their AI and any type of electronics like that, were becoming robust, to say the least. With this, Larry simply looked over at the intelligence folks and said, "What, you're telling me your ciphers don't work anymore?" "Yeah, I call bullshit." "Yeah, well, the ciphers work, but eventually they'll be pushed out by advanced technology. That's just the way it works. I am well versed in this, you know that. Don't forget any of that." With this, both the consulate and the intel both looked at each other and then went back to their work. They went across more of the shipyard's designs, as some were much larger and some were a lot smaller. They all came to the consensus easily that this was way more than the Caltipsian needed to rebuild their fleet after they lost so many in their invasion of the Friends. And they did not at all need this many ships. What made it even more dangerous was the fact that the Caltipsian do not have a very high biological potential. They have even less children than humans do, which is surprising because human populations went into a decline around early in the 21st century, and they never did stabilize until very, very recently. The only reason human populations have fully stabilized is the introduction of other races that have decided to adjust themselves. This brought a new level of folks wanting to reproduce. At least they wanted the fun part of reproduction, which leads to the reproduction. With this information, of course, Larry was very silent, but he did give a little nod turn to his picture frame that was sitting on his desk. A picture of his wife holding the twins right after they were born. He was holding his son, she was holding his daughter. And with that, he simply shook his head up and down slightly as they continued. Along with that, the Calpians were raising the concern that they could not visit Earth. They were more than a little pissed at this, as they had allowed any other groups to actually come and visit their home planet as a sign of peace. They were beginning to charge humanity with being very aggressive, trying to protect something. What are you trying to protect? What are you trying to hide? It was constant inside the senates and going back and forth with different emissaries about how Earth did not allow anybody who was not a full-blood human to get any closer than Proxima 3. And because the Calpian were bitching up a storm, other species began to look over at humanity with a little bit of concern. They did start to wonder, what is humanity covering for? What are they hiding? What can we get from them? With this, it was to be expected that other emissaries, along with the Calpian, would be trying to almost strong-arm humanity into letting them visit, along with getting a hold of any of their technology. Not only that, but some of the friends have started to wonder why they cannot even visit Earth. Humans would rather go out and visit them instead. And with that, the Calpian version of the KGB has been making plans, making a lot of deals in the back. So much so that even the intel analysts admitted that they can't keep up with all of it. This surprised the crap out of Larry, since their intelligence apparatus was extremely large. It was like a strange web that reached out across the stars, interlinking everything. How could they not know what every little bit was doing? However, with all friends and foes trying to find their way into human space and human intelligence networks, it was getting sketchy. Once they sowed the seeds of discourse, they were shown that they were still a bit mad that they were forced to surrender their territory, as they put it. In actuality, they were not forced to surrender anything. They surrendered during the war. They said they would pull back their forces, but humanity never claimed any of their territory. Other species might have wanted to, and a few planets might have changed hands, but nothing absolutely crazy was happening. In actuality, the Calpian had pulled back at least one sector away from all sides and started to build up their defenses. It's though they wanted to have some sort of buffer zone in case humanity tried to bounce its way in. They wouldn't lose any colonies. They wouldn't lose any supplies. They wouldn't lose anything. They simply had circled the wagons and wanted to keep everybody out. However, the fact that they had seen a few of the Earth's probes jumping in made them even more paranoid than ever. It seemed as though they were afraid they were going to lose themselves in the ether of space or something. Yet it was clear to everybody that they were almost exclusively defense-based at this point. They didn't seem to have the ability to reach out and hurt someone if they wanted to. This put a little bit of them at ease as they started to discuss things. However, what they wanted with Larry was him to watch the actions of those of the Calpian to see if they were doing anything crazy. The intel man said this with a little bit of a smirk, which made Larry jump to his feet and actually knife hand him in the face and say, "I'm not one of you, and I refuse to be. You pissed on me before. I'm not doing it. You told me when I tried to be one of you guys to go fuck off, so that's what I'm telling you on this one. I am not one of your ghosts. I'm not going to be going around. You want somebody? You send someone in as a student or something. I'm not going to be one. Will I watch out for the safety of this school and especially my family? Absolutely. And by the way, I see that look in your eyes. If you even think for a second of trying to use my family against me, I swear to Christ, you are not leaving this office." With this, the consular was actually afraid as he saw that with the other hand, Larry was actually reaching behind his belt. He worried that Larry would take something out and shoot the intel analyst right in the forehead. However, the intel analyst simply nodded his head, raised his hands a little bit in a mark of surrender, and they continued on. With this, they changed over to the Zneckel. The Zneckel had been trying to get their hands on human genetic alteration tech, CRISPR, for at least the 8 years that has been since the actual invasion. They have been trying so hard that it seems as though they're willing to pay not just top dollar, but unbelievable absorbent amounts for something that is 20, 30, 40 years old. The issue with that is when they get this technology, they immediately start experimenting. It is believed that they're trying to experiment to make their own people larger, stronger. As it is, the Zneckel are a reptilian species that, though larger than a human, lack the sheer power. It is noted that they can keep up with most humans as far as speed, and along with that, their body allows them to move in ways that humans just can't, unless you alter the human, of course. Though there are many humans that have altered themselves to be just as mobile, it's not commonplace. Though, in a fight straight up, it is well known that the Zneckel just cannot take a hit. Their bodies are just not set up for it, which is why they do best when they do a type of ambush tactic where their opponent can't fight back. Yet, it's been noted again that they don't ambush as well as they think. The major concern, though, is if they get a hold of the genetic CRISPR technology, they will end up adjusting themselves to a more suitable level as far as power. They might lose a little bit of speed, but they'll be able to go hand to hand, or in this case, hand to claw, against a human as far as power. Along with that, they also noted that the Zneckel were interested in adding appendages to their warriors. Warriors that have additional appendages, that's a dual-edged sword. However, this can be bad if you're not used to fighting somebody with additional appendages. Larry was a little confused at this until they showed them a video. This holographic video was smuggled out of Zneckel space. They were able to get it on one of their drones, but they only caught maybe 3 minutes of it. It was clearly somebody of their warrior caste had gone in to be altered. They put them in a more cumbersome type of tube compared to what humanity uses. It was clear that they had not micronized many of their parts down to what humanity was using. But humanity did this more out of necessity than anything else, because many of the parts, when they're focused down, tend to be a lot more detailed. And with that, they knew that they could handle the extreme calculations needed for this. Though they saw the Zneckel warrior caste actually get in, what came out was not a warrior caste. When the pod opened, they all looked. There was a strange amount of steam that came out. But was that steam? They didn't know what it was. Then a body fell forward. There's arms growing out of its back, an extra head coming out of its chest, another tail that came out from the opposite side. This thing, a leg was growing out of its leg. A leg actually grew out of one of the necks. Several of the eyes were added, other ones were seemingly exploded inside the head. It laid there groaning in pain, seeming not to be able to move, and then it tried to talk, and a whole bunch of red, orange, and green fluid spit out one of the heads. Then the other one tried to talk, and then another dose of fluid, but this time it was brown. This thing had literally just shit out its mouth. That's all they could think of as the video itself ended, as those in charge went up and put this poor soul out of the misery they had put him in. They all looked at each other with absolute horror at this. They worried that eventually the Zneckel were going to be able to figure this out. This video itself was almost 4 years old. They worried how far the Zneckel had actually figured things out by then. Though they're not the greatest of engineers, mind you. They are tenacious, and if they had help from the Caltipsian, no one knows what's going on. Along with that, they were also purchasing an absorbent amount of Corvette-class ships from the Caltipsian. However, this was also something they couldn't do much about. You see, the Zneckel used this same class of ship for their cargo hauling capabilities. It was well noted that they were small and fast, but they definitely held a lot of cargo. This allowed them to move small shipments to different planets very, very quickly. It seemed as though they were trying to take a page out of the old USPS book, where they sent out a massive fleet of carriers instead of having one going to every single space and taking a long time. They were moving more and more resources, so their logistics was very much streamlined with this. But what made them very interesting was that the Corvettes were armed. It was clear that they had an armored blister, that some sort of weapons were being stored. When they saw one of these, a picture of it or a video of them inside some sort of spaceport, these armored areas would never be extended. They would never open. Only the cargo area would open. And that's all. This made them wonder what the hell they were hiding. They didn't know if it was some new type of energy weapon. Maybe it was some sort of ballistic weapon. They didn't know. It could have been something as simple as an AMS system or point defense. They didn't know, but this was something dangerous. They realized that the number of Corvette-class ships were something that they wouldn't be able to stop. As they all ran a battle strategy through their head, they all began to discuss about what would happen if the Zneckel brought all these Corvettes into one of the human planets, say a colony world. Well, it would simply overrun it by numbers. Basically diving in, saying, damn the torpedoes, they would be able to get inside the atmosphere before the orbital defense system would be able to lock on enough small ships to even slow them down, let alone stop them. And by then, Corvette-class ships would be able to dodge most direct shot rounds. Most mass driver cannons fired rather slowly compared to energy weapons, and usually mass drivers were the preferred weapon, just because they wouldn't overheat and have to take almost a day to cool off. That being said, they all sat back and realized that the Zneckel and the Caltipsian had learned. They weren't stupid, and it's never good to underestimate an opponent, ever. With this new information, they did ask Larry if he was able to watch the new students and see if there was any additional appendages, anything that made the Zneckel bigger, faster, meaner, or anything of that. If he might see a large amount of their ships, maybe. It was a complete question mark, and they seemed actually concerned. Larry understood that when an intel guy is actually looking nervous, not trying to be, then things are in trouble. Eventually, they moved on to more pleasant news. As it turned out, more and more of the Forged had wanted to be adjusted. They seemed to want to be transformed in numbers similar to that of Nishani. The Nishani had been working with humans to be adjusted and held before the war, and many of them wanted the new type of bodies. However, this is causing internal struggles. The Forced in particular did not like the fact that the younger generations were more interested in becoming something other than their native species. Many of those that refused to be adjusted seemed to have some sort of prejudice against those that did, though it wasn't completely unwarranted. All three of them just kind of rolled their eyes at this. The internal struggles between the altered and the unaltered, as Larry said, yeah, just like us, huh? The other two just kind of nodded, saying, okay, yeah, yep, we went through the same thing. With that, they also found out that the Co were looking into alterations. Although not nearly in the numbers, in fact, just one or two at a time, it was instructed to Larry that if a Co had actually come up and asked to know what was involved in alteration, he should just give them the best guidance they can. Larry immediately said, "So I should give the same thing I told my wife." They looked at each other and then looked back at Larry and asked, "What was that?" "I told her not to do it." They all looked at each other and then turned back to him. And of course, the Chancellor thought he'd lighten the mood and say, "So, you like her more feline than female, huh? Well, pussy's pussy." With that, of course, Larry chucked something across the office, not deliberately trying to hit anybody, nor did he, but it was enough to actually bring everyone back. And of course, they did share a bit of a chuckle at this, though not nearly as much as when the intel man said, "You really think so? You should meet his sister in law," motioning to Larry. Larry realized that the intel guy had actually met his blonde sister in law, who had been changed into a more human, more forced, yet she was more liberal with the way she was thinking of dealing with humans than anything else. Larry simply turned away and remarked, "You think that's interesting? You should meet her when she's in heat," which immediately made the other two guys look up with wide eyes, as in going, "What?" Getting back on topic, the intel guy gave Larry a program that would show them what the alterations can do and what they would do to the additional and other species that might want to get themselves adjusted using human tech. They would still have to pay a human technician along with their other services to actually get this done, as the technology was very, very well secured. To say that is being an extreme understatement. It is also noted that Larry is going to have to show them that they're not going to get all the wants, and he's going to get a lot of species saying, "I want this," especially when it comes to the guys. "I want to be more." Larry just raised his hand. "Don't finish the sentence. We know where you're going." With that, they again went back to their own notes. There was a warning that came out to Larry. He was told that they might try to pressure him to give up any type of intel or to show them around his shuttle or, God help them, his ship. And they would try to pressure him personally, or they would go through the family, i.e., say something as though the family would be hurt if he doesn't go along, or try to get a hold of the family directly and threaten them to give something, especially as kids are tend to be impressionable. Larry got extremely serious for a moment and stated, "Really, if they try that, they're in a bad way. I've been training my kids since they were old enough to find their own tails." This got the two men's attention as they looked inquisitive and then asked, "Why would you train them at so young? Really? Have you seen what comes out of Japan?" Of course, they looked at each other and laughed their asses off at that, as the whole idea of the whole cat girl in a little school uniform was still a constant thing, even this far into the future. They seemed to again chuckle at this, but most of them were just trying to relax the mood a little bit. At that point, both the Chancellor and the Intel analyst suggested that they bring in an instructor to help train the children, train them on basic piloting, basic engineering, and of course, basic hand to hand combat training along with weapons. Larry looked at them with a gaze that could melt through a glacier in less than a second. "I have not forgotten how to fight, and don't you ever forget that." With that, they both realized how serious he was about it, and they simply left it at that. The meeting ended not long after, and Larry was able to return home. In actuality, it was his day off, and he wanted to spend it with his wife and his kids, as they most likely would have gotten up. As he got home, Gregnar had already made breakfast, and the kids had already started scarfing theirs down. He kind of laughed because even though they're part human, they still eat like the Forced. They just dive into their meal, especially anything that's high in protein, meats, eggs, or anything like that. And down the hatch it goes, usually in large portions. He simply went up, gave the kids a hug, then gave his wife a very big hug, which actually picked her up off the ground. And while doing so, of course, he gave her ass a little bit of a squeeze just to remind her he still thought she was attractive. She grinned a little bit, of course, and then asked him, "So, good meeting?" He looked at her, "No, but it's good to be home." With that, he immediately went down to breakfast as he thought about what he had listened to. He didn't want his children or his wife to worry about what may or may not be coming, but it weighed heavy on his mind. Gregnar realized this, but she didn't let anyone know, though Larry could see the concern because she always tilted her ears a certain way when she was concerned about him. He always used to find this cute, but now he was a bit concerned that the kids were going to pick up on it. And as the kids finished up and brought their plates to the sink, he reminded them that they have an hour before training starts. They simply said, "Okay, Dad," and then took off to their respective rooms. While they did, he worried. He worried about his kids. And the only thing on his mind after that was, "Oh, crap. Hearing all that stuff before. What the hell am I going to find on the first day of school?"